Hello everyone, in our previous video, we made an introduction to the topic of mental health and career development. If you haven't seen the first video, please make sure to watch it first. In this video, we will talk about how we recognize and address the issues of mental health and well-being when we support international students' career development in our various practice settings. Let's talk about professional mental health services. As a licensed psychologist, I have a group practice in New York City. An important part of my work is to provide psychotherapy and coaching services for international students. Oftentimes, international students seek professional help when they are already in dire need. They can be very depressed, have suicidal thoughts, or are at risk of being expelled from school, for example. Internship and job search is often a critical moment when international students reach out for help. And many of them come to realize they need help with their confidence in order to overcome their anxiety and take on the challenges of networking. Or they know what they need to do in their job search, but they just can't seem to mobilize the energy and motivation required to get things done. I also offer coaching services to international students who are in the beginning of their journey in the US. They may see potential challenges coming their way, but they haven't developed significant mental health issues at this point. These are students who generally want to be proactive about their academic and career planning. They want to know what skills they need to develop in order to do well in the US. It can be very challenging to be an international student in the US, facing the task of navigating cross-cultural differences. Some of the risk factors many international students face include, number one, it is usually their first time away from home, and at the same time, they are just learning how to be a full-blown adult. And number two, they usually have no established social and professional network in the US. So in the job search times, they can feel very isolated and without resources. And number three, many of them will have to experience significant cultural differences, a different set of values that is emphasized in the academic settings in the US versus what they have mastered back home. Finally, it can be their first time being a minority member in a society. So experiencing and navigating phenomena such as discrimination and microaggressions for the very first time without any guidance can be particularly daunting to them. How do mental health practitioners address these issues in therapy with international students when they are at a critical juncture of career development? First, we want to stabilize the situation, meaning we want to help students develop coping strategies to manage stressors in their lives. Sometimes medications may be needed if they don't respond well to psychotherapy alone. Number two, we want to assess the situation the student is in and set a reasonable expectation for the timeline of recovery. Students are usually on the visa clock at the time of internship or job search. So it's usually helpful if students can work with their international student advisor to find ways to obtain more time. Other than helping students develop coping strategies, therapists can sometimes use a more solution-focused approach to address some concrete issues students are facing, such as helping them identify other resources needed for the job search process. For example, work with a career counselor to refine their resume, identify their strengths and potential organizations to apply to. Likely, students may present with some underlying deeper issues that require time to process and work through. So the therapist would also point out these deeper level of issues and help students start addressing them. It is one thing for students to find a good job, but it can be another for them to thrive in the workplace. Oftentimes, it calls for skills that don't really get taught explicitly in school. Some international students struggle to grasp nuanced but important dynamics in the workplace. This is an area where a coach specialized in this can be particularly helpful.
I have worked as a career counselor serving international students for more than 6 years. From my past practice, I realized there is huge second language anxiety during students' job search process. International students who are job seekers have experienced a great amount of anxiety derived from the foreign language. They were more likely to experience the uneasy, worry, nervousness feeling during their use of English in their job search. Specifically, their anxiety occurred in 3 different situations. First, they found it intimidating to attend phone interviews. The poor connection and the lack of visual cues can lead to miscommunication and misunderstanding. Having a conversation over the phone is twice as difficult as face-to-face conversations. Secondly, coming from other cultures as non-native speakers, it was challenging for international students to learn and follow the professional email etiquette and rules. It was difficult for international students to balance between the formal and casual language use, especially in the critical and tricky email situations about interview invitation and interview follow-up. Additionally, as networking played a vital role in the process of job seeking, as non-native English speakers, it was of great difficulty for international students to navigate the networking progress. They felt embarrassed when they were asked to initiate the conversation and connect with professionals, build relationships, and ask for a job referral. During job search, many international students tend to exaggerate the importance of English proficiency while neglecting the emphasis of their own skills and knowledge that employers value most. More importantly, language anxiety may adversely affect international students' self-esteem and self-confidence, making them even harder to stand out during the competitive interviews. For career service practitioners serving international students, here are some suggestions to tackle their limited language fluency during the job search. Firstly, we should encourage students to practice English writing, speaking, and listening skills. Secondly, we can ask students to follow nonverbal cues that project confidence and professional presence. Thirdly, we can encourage students to focus on their strengths and skills instead of focusing on their language proficiency. Show their achievement with highlighting skills and knowledge. There are unique marketable skills for international students such as resourcefulness, flexibility, intercultural competency, the ability to navigate through a different social and cultural system.
In my work as a counselor educator, mentor, and researcher, I encounter narratives of international students constructed by multiple layers of individual, community, institutional, and larger systems. In career services practices, we need to pay closer attention to them. A persistent example is the limitation and complications of the work authorization and work visa policies in the United States. The Trump government's Muslim travel ban and increased racism and xenophobia against Asian international students during the COVID-19 pandemic are some other examples that we have witnessed in the last few years. Furthermore, international students may be similarly and even more impacted by the changes and challenges in their country of origin, and they may develop anxiety about transitioning back after being away for a long time. They may also face decisions to move and adjust to a third country for work or more education. Not addressing or the lack of timely social institutional support in these areas impact international students in diverse ways and levels depending on their intersectional identities and related needs. Thus, besides the strategies and best practices we covered so far, we suggest integrating a systemic perspective. Mental health concerns are not just personal. Addressing international student mental health and career development without recognizing systemic impact would feel short, and in some cases, it can be neglectful and discriminatory. By using a systemic perspective, we don't suggest we can eliminate all barriers with counseling, but we can identify the most pressing risk factors, needs, potential future challenges to set goals, as well as strengths and community-based resources to develop counseling support plans accordingly. This way, we can provide reality checking without discouragement, for example, about the challenges that Vivi and Maggie described earlier, and support agency and empowerment through effective preparation, including backup plans. Using a systemic perspective is also a critical indication of cultural competence. For example, international students' understanding and use of mental health support may be different than ours. We need to establish an adequate level of rapport or trust, and one tool can be broaching, to explore similar and different identities we hold and how they may impact our understanding of topics such as work or mental health, along with the dynamics or process in counseling sessions. When we explore different systems, for instance, by using a community genogram activity, we can also avoid jumping into conclusions too fast. Let's say we assume depression symptoms for an international student who lost her motivation and energy for her studies, eats poorly, socially withdrawn, having a hard time to get up on time in the mornings to go to her classroom or work environment. An environment where she's suffering from very long research lab hours with very low wage and without recognition of her work through a publication authorship, mentorship, or other meaningful ways. So instead of directly referring the student to a mental health professional, where the focus might shift to mostly symptoms, we can explore how career and mental health needs may compete and identify what changes and support are needed in both areas. As career development professionals, it's our ethical responsibility to identify the most pressing needs and associated risks. When we are doing this, we need to collaborate with clients, with international students, to identify the nature and order of support strategies in culturally relevant ways. Perhaps normalize challenges and help destigmatize mental health support if needed first. When we do such work, we need to do that within the scope of our professional competencies, of course, and to make sure we need supervision and consultation. Such support can help us explore timely and effective referral options for other professional services when our own expertise and job descriptions or counseling settings do not meet student needs. While culturally responsive counseling and other services as described will facilitate self-advocacy and empowerment for international students, we should also consider other ways of advocacy. For example, we can use our power and privileges to demand more cultural competence training for ourselves and more proactive and integrative campus support services for students. We can also share our observations and needs assessment data, for example, with administrators and other decision makers to tackle various risk factors and systemic barriers that impact both career development and mental health. And what's next, or what can be next? We recommend you to revisit the reflection questions at the beginning of the first video in this two-part series. We also hope that you will continue seeking more information and resources to support the critical connection between career development and mental health for international students. A few examples for the possible next steps can be to connect with mental health professionals on your campus or organization. You can even invite them to your team meetings to discuss and improve needs assessment and referral systems between your divisions. You can also explore ways to join an existing committee if there is one, or create a task force to address this topic on your campus. And you can find more ideas from the best practices and other resources in the NCDA International Student Services Committee Resource Guide, as well as NCDA webinars and others listed in the reference section of the slides, which you can find at the link under this video.
That's the end of today's video. Learn more about the committee and find resources by visiting ncda.org. Join our LinkedIn group, NCDA International Student Career Development Professionals. If you like this video, please subscribe to our channel and share it with friends and colleagues that you work with. See you in the next one.